Ooh, Streams of Light podcast. Gonna have some pinch of Celtic salt here. It's a little mineral salt. Little mineral replacement system. But I don't got any salt in my teeth. At least I'm not eating spinach, right? Streams of Light podcast. Beautiful Southern California Tuesday afternoon. It's November 2nd of 2021. Just cruising along here. Year 2021 is like winding down. We're in holiday season. Well, Halloween. Soon to be here is Thanksgiving. And then, lo and behold, we will have Christmas. Wonderful time of year. Thanks for joining us again. My name is Chris Anthony, and this is Streams of Light. Excited about the subject today. And really, everything changes once you realize this one thing. The power of what the mind can produce. It's really amazing when you really get into it and you begin to not just study it and read books about it, but when you get to experiment with the power of the mind, it's amazing. It's amazing. So one example would be the placebo effect in drug studies. I think they give something like, they expect somewhere up to potentially up to 30% increase because of the placebo effect. The mind is a very powerful thing. And that's what I want to talk about today because it's so far reaching. And there's so many people who struggle with what I would call mental warfare, right? Mental warfare, their own. They're at war with themselves. It's coming from the inside. Oh man, that's a problem. The power of what the mind can produce. And it really is one of the secrets, I believe, in life. And particularly if you're a spiritual person, you're a spiritual sojourner or a seeker, the power of the mind is really something that you want to stop and consider, and then possibly delve into some of the more powerful forms of mind control, which I'll get to a little bit later in the podcast. So I think everyone at some point in time has had the mind challenge, right? You might have been a kid standing in line to get on a big roller coaster, and right at the last minute, you hit the chicken exit, right? Like, yeah, guy, there's the chicken exit. I'm going out. Why? Because your mind was tormenting you. Your heart started to race. You can see the effects of the mind just over the physical being, even in a matter of minutes. So that's just something that I think we all need to consider, is the power of the mind. I want to get my chat window up here. First of all, I want just some housekeeping items real quick here. For Streams of Light podcast, we are live streaming on 4 different platforms simultaneously, thanks to Restream. And so we're going primarily to YouTube as our primary focus as far as channel, but we have Facebook Live as well. And then we have Twitch and Twitter. So on any of those respective platforms, please like the podcast and send us a chat. And that's what I wanted to do right now, is open up a chat window. Or I couldn't find my chat window. I want to make sure it's open. So in the case that we get any chats, I can see it. And I can't see very well. So I can't see my chat window. It's got to be around here somewhere. Oh, there it is. Okay, I found it. Never mind. Okay, good. Oh, and we got it. Yeah. Okay, so power of the mind. And I'm excited about it, not because it's such a torment for so many people, but because it could lead to a big change for so many people going into this consideration of the power of the mind. And as I said, it's affected everyone at some point in time. If you think more deeply about brain waves in general, or thoughts as energy, now this is something that absolutely fascinates me because I'm a wave rider. I ride waves of energy. It's also referred to as surfing. And of course, most people think you're simply surfing the water, which you are, but you aren't. You're surfing a wave of energy that's pushing the water. That's pretty powerful. If you think about that, like if you're a surfer, or if you've seen surfers, you know how big those waves can get. That's all energy that's been generated from storms, from winds that are traveling sometimes thousands of miles through ocean waters. And as they get close to shore, the wave in general, the mathematics is a wave will break when, if you have a 10-foot wave, for example, it will break in 5 feet of water. So that's the general rule of thumb for surfing water waves. And, you know, the waves can get quite big, but I'm fascinated because for many years I just rode waves thinking, everyone knows, all the surfers know you call them waves, but what no one really thinks about is, why do we call them waves? Because they're waves of energy. And if you've ever seen a scope, you know, these engineers, I used to work in tech, and some of the older guys, they had these scopes, and they would, you know, sometimes they'd have music playing and they'd hook the music up to their scope, their energy sort of gathering scope, and you'd see these like waves that look like ocean waves. And it was what the music was creating, the waves of energy that the music creates. So, you know, energy waves are really fascinating when you think about it. And for the most part, science has, in more recent years, said all matter is energy. Although there is one guy who, you know, when we talk about energy, we you know, originally they talked about waves and particles. So, you know, a wave of energy or particle of matter. One of my favorite authors, who's a New York Times bestseller, said he begs to differ. Most matter is energy, but I guess there's a couple of little teeny exceptions. But for the most part, most of the spiritual community talks about how all matter is energy. And really, for the most part, that's true. So think about it. Thoughts as waves of energy, just like waves of the ocean. And you think about how powerful it is when a surfer is riding a wave of energy that's passing through the water. And that energy is pushing and propelling him as he rides a literal wave of energy. Wow, that is really cool. And once I figured that out in surfing, once I really, really thought about that and figured it out, it became a joy to surf, because I realized that I was like surfing this invisible wave of energy that was just manifesting, right? The energy is manifesting in, you know, through the water. As it pushes the water, as it moves through the water, it crests through the water. So, you know, of course, energy, you know, never really disappears completely. It just sort of turns into other forms. So when a wave comes in to land, you know, there's friction, there's heat, and so on and so forth. There could be some wind coming off the waves, but all those things, basically, nothing is ever lost. Bottom line, no energy really, that I know of, as far as science goes, no energy ever really disappears. So think about the mind. Of course, we know that there's different waves of energy in the mind. We know that there's alpha and beta and theta and delta and all these different, you know, Greek letter, you know, what stands for different types of brain waves. So we know that the mind creates brainwaves. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think that the mind is that powerful. We've all thought of, you know, the person who could, like, with mind power, you know, like, you know, make something move. And, you know, sometimes we think, it's kind of hokey. But when you think about it, literally, because thoughts are energy, they affect the body greatly. And they affect your environment. That's why when someone walks into the room and they're really upset, everyone kind of turns around like, what's going on? They might not even hear anything yet. You can just feel it, right? So there's a lot of power in the mind and in our attitudes and our thoughts. So thoughts are waveforms of energy. And that's just really powerful. That's something to just kind of go into and sort of explore, like a child, and maybe experiment a little bit with that. What happens in the mind is that there's neurons, and these neurons, you know, basically the neurons are in the cells, and so all these sort of neurons need to communicate with each other. So the neurons create a signal, electrical impulse. and that kind of goes down the neuron down this one path, and then it triggers what's called a neurotransmitter, which is really a chemical release, and that is the neurotransmitter is kind of like the you could look at it kind of like as the Wi-Fi, because it's just like you might go from like a cell tower to cell tower. It's like in this sense you got a neuron in a cell that sends a signal, and the neurotransmitter travels in between the other neurons. It is a chemical reaction, and then sends that message to the next receptor in the next cell, and then the neuron, fires. And it's pretty cool when you think about it. It's just amazing, really. And so when we do certain things like brush our teeth every morning, we fire up these certain neurons, and we have these these pathways, neural pathways, and we even use that term in technology because artificial intelligence is creating basically the same kind of thing. It's basically creating, these neural networks, and it's really powerful. So the mind does this, and all these things happen, and we think that the mind is just like some, physical thing, in our brain, and we're sort of stuck in life the way we are, and man, I mean, okay, probably the thing you could relate to the most as far as the power of the mind is what I mentioned in the beginning about like a kid who goes to an amusement park. If you really think about the power of your own mind in the negative sense, and I don't like to bring up, I'd rather not talk about negative things, but I want to speak to as many people as I can on this issue. And I feel like the way to do that is to talk about, the things that trigger us, or how we can actually change our own body state just by a few thoughts. Again, I don't want to be negative, but that is very familiar here on Earth in the lower parts, right? So you had a bad experience with your boss on Friday, and you come back to work on Monday, and you're walking up to the front door, and as you look through the window, there he is. It's your boss, and he's right by the reception counter, and you kind of get the feeling that, he's talking to someone, but he looks at you, and let's just say at that moment, you got the feeling like he's waiting for and he wants to talk to you. Okay, so he's upset at you last time you saw him on Friday. It's Monday. He's had some time to think about it. You've had some time to think about it. And now you see him and he's looking at you as you walk up. I guarantee you most people would have an elevated heart rate, would they not? Yeah, they would have an elevated heart rate, and they might go into defense mode. They might think of other times they've been fired, or other times bosses have yelled at them, potentially, abusively, treat them in an abusive manner. It happens all the time. All those memories, and then what happens in our body. So that's just an example, and I'm just talking about like heart rate, survival instincts. You're already thinking of what you're going to say to defend yourself, or maybe you're thinking that you're just going to walk in and throw your badge down and go, you know what, I quit or whatever, just because you don't want him to like fire you or whatever it is. So, the mind is a powerful thing. And so we're talking about these negative things. And what we really haven't talked about at this point is the positive. And I think that is probably one of the things that interests me more than anything, because we all know about the negative effects of the mind, the restless mind, the worrying mind, the fearful mind, the mind that won't let us sleep at night during major crises in our life. We all know about that. And not many people talk about the flip side. And it's kind of all about, as far as I'm concerned, it's all about the flip side. To me, if you can create chaos, fear, you can create all these, hormonal releases in your body, chemicals that are not good for you, the fight and flight stuff, the shallow breathing out of the upper chest. Think about what you could do on the flip side, just through intention and through practice. So, the mind can, it's either your worst enemy or it's your greatest asset in life. And I've had to at times look at my life, and we all need to. So sometimes you look at your life and you go, wow, what's going on right now? And if you're honest with yourself, you might think, okay, my mind is probably the worst enemy, because, that boss wasn't very nice to me last Friday, but I was tormented over the weekend by my own thoughts and things going over and over and over again. So if you don't have any control whatsoever over your own mental processes, the mind can be a terrible, terrible thing. It's funny that they had that movie, with Russell Crowe called A Beautiful Mind, because he was really, and he had obviously he had a mental illness, but he was really tormented by his mind. And oftentimes people that have the most creativity and enormous depth and potential in their mind can sometimes, conversely have many, many troubles as well. So a very active mind isn't always the end goal. And more oftentimes than not, we need to learn how to slow the mind down, to stop the mind. And I want to share with you a little bit later how to do that. I want to reflect for a moment on how powerful this mind can be in the sense of dreaming. For those of you who've had lucid dreams, you might have been really, really stoked after you had one of those, because if you look at a dream that is like a mental movie, that's one thing. But many, many people in this day and age, as we progress deeper into spiritual practices that improve the mind, the body, the psyche, what we are seeing is we're seeing more and more people. And we know that people that have near-death experiences will report many of these things, but we are seeing more and more people that are not only having lucid dreams, they're having out-of-body experiences, sometimes what's referred to as astral projection. And the astral body, which in the astral world would be, according to Eastern tradition, would be the next layer up from the dense, gross body. As we go into more subtle realms, they believe that we have multiple bodies, and you can see that in Kirlian photography. In the photographs, we can see the colors of the energy centers and the dim outlines of subtle bodies. So the astral body would be the next layer away from this gross, dense physical body. And then the causal, different traditions have different terms, right? Like just like heaven and nirvana, there's different words from different traditions, but another Eastern term outside of the astral body or astral would be the causal body, and that would be even finer than astral. So, but let's go back to dreaming for a second, because dreaming, for people who've had lucid dreams, wow, they're just amazing. Once you realize, oh, I'm dreaming, and you're like totally awake, but your body is still asleep. So it's like the body's like in that paralytic state. That's why some people panic and have, there's a term that they use in Mexico. It's El Diablo something or other. If you know what it is, send me a chat. It's something like the devil on the chest. They say that because if you've ever had that dream life where all of a sudden you realized you were totally lucid during your dream, and then you realized, oh, I'm sleeping. And then you tried to, but you're in the paralytic state. Your body goes into a natural paralytic state while you're dreaming. So you don't break your ankle when you're running in your dreams, right? It wouldn't be good. Or kick the person next to you in bed, or punch them, or, you see the dogs when they're dreaming and their paws are, doing, you can see the nerve synapses, going, but there's no full movement. Like, they're running or they're sniffing, but they're not fully doing it. So when you're in that state and dreaming, basically when you're in the lucid state, when your body's in the semi-paralytic or the paralytic state, and you're okay with that, then now you take charge of the dream. And now, it's like we've seen in the movies, right? Instead of being yelled at by someone, now we're like a superhero, or we fly away, or we just do whatever. It's pretty cool. So lucid dreaming is very powerful. Some of these may be like mental movies. But then there are those who are very certain, and I'm one of those. And I know there's many, so very many. And then I know that the people on the other side of the fence who haven't had this happen are very skeptical, and I understand why. I was very skeptical about many things in spirituality and thought, oh, that's baloney, or it's wrong, or it's even deception or delusion or whatever. But there are many people who know about, this astral body. And most people who have some sort of major awakening event, spiritual event, transcendent event, or have a regular spiritual practice where they are progressing with the help of a tried and true method for progression into higher things and more transcendental states, those people will oftentimes have out-of-body experiences and other signs as well, like clairvoyance, clairaudience, things like that. So now, rather than a mental movie, if you're astral projecting, you know that you are flying not just in your mind in a movie, but you can actually feel astral winds as you're moving. You can see things. You see clearer when you gaze upward and inward a little bit, like you would in meditation, like Shambhavi Mudra. For those of you who know how to do Shambhavi Mudra, if you do that during your out-of-body experience, you will usually see more colors, more clarity. So the power of the mind in controlling your physical body. But wait a second, we have another body? Yeah, astral body. And as you get deeper into meditative states, and particularly in some of these Eastern methods of meditation that are more esoteric and energetic related, like Kundalini or Kriya, when you get more into these esoteric practices, it will become blatantly obvious to your astral body, particularly the astral spine. As we meditate and learn to control energy, we will begin to feel the subtle bodies that surround, that are within and surround our physical body. So the power of the mind is amazing. Why would you want to move into a realm like the astral body or the astral? Well, some people are adventuresome, so they like to, have experiences, right? Just like they like to go on roller coasters, like to have out-of-body experiences. That's cool. I get that, and I'm that way too. I'm a traveler. I like going to Italy, and I wouldn't mind going to Alpha Centauri while I was at it, right? But they're two different things, really. And but it just goes to show you that as you progress in this thing called mind control, or what that can be referred to as yoga. When I say that, I don't just mean the class where you're doing a vinyasa or an Ashtanga flow or something like that. I'm actually talking about the Eightfold Path, where you move into mind control, which is the definition that Patanjali gives of yoga. Yoga is the cessation of mental modifications. That's the second sutra that Patanjali speaks about. And so mind control is a spiritual, really, ultimately will come down to a spiritual practice. And even those who are not spiritual, though, okay, so when I say that, that's not exclusive. I want to be very inclusive, because I think some of the best minds, some of the greatest inventions have happened because of what we call yoga, what we call mind control. It doesn't mean that people have to be like reading Eastern mystics or going to yoga flow classes and things like that, or even meditating. Because if you think about it, when a scientist is working on something and is very, very focused, ain't no different than meditation for the most part. I mean, yeah, their mind may be solving problems and things. There might be those mental things happening, but there is an enormous amount of concentration in these discoveries, deep thoughts, deep things happening, people waking up in the middle of the night, writing down things that are coming to them almost seemingly from another place, deep in their mind, deep in the recesses of their mind, which, is a mystery. So mind control isn't, I would call it a spiritual practice, but it doesn't necessarily have to be practiced by people who consider themselves self-spiritual. That's very important to know. If you look at a lot of Einstein's comments that were, quoted, some are misquoted or some are not really him. But if you Google like some of Einstein's spiritual quotes, even though not all 100% of them are actually real, there is a good amount of them that are really amazing. And you can see the man definitely understood some things about spirituality and about reality, which, I mean, I think reality is what we call it spirituality, but, when you become spiritual, then you start seeing what's really real and what's not real. And that's the fun thing about it. So if you want to be real, you kind of want to go, you kind of want to like get on a spiritual path, but when you get on the spiritual path, it'll just make you like a real person. And you'll be really connected and you'll realize what's real and what's not, because that's the other thing about the mind. Mental constructs, things that we make up. We think our boss is going to fire us when we walk in because he was mad at us over the weekend. But what he's really waiting to do when we get in there is he wants to pull you aside and say, I had a problem in the family. One of my family members was sick, or, this or that tragedy happened, and I had a really bad day on Friday, and I just want to say, hey, I'm sorry. And that wasn't you. Well, think about that, because maybe all weekend long, your mind was working on this master, construct thing about how your boss has always been out to get you, and really has been. And really, you might not only have been there to apologize, but he might have been all along grooming you for like the next leg up. You just, the mind is like diabolically scary at times, people, isn't it? I mean, that's the way I feel, especially when the light shines. When the light shines, it's like, oh. And I mean, how many people on their dying deathbeds have probably thought things like, why did I think this all my life? When all of a sudden, you ever notice how lucid people, sometimes people aren't lucid right up till dying, but sometimes people get so lucid. They know what's important all of a sudden. They want to talk to someone in their family. They want to say, I'm sorry. They want to say, hey, you're the best, or whatever, and they want, they all that stuff. They thought that was so important, like the careers or the this or the that. And now all that, nothing matters. And they're seeing so clearly. It's like a lot of those mental constructs that were created are just blown away. Just it's like a hurricane force wind, gale wind that comes in and blows out all the illusions. And now they know why they were on Earth, what they need to say to their kids, their parents, their friends. The Last Lecture by Randy Posh, that was a freaking amazing book. If you haven't read it, it's pretty old now. I mean, as far as, it's over a decade old, but that was an amazing book that this guy wrote. It was a New York Times bestseller. I recommend you get it. It was about a guy who had pancreatic cancer, and he knew his time was short. And every year at his university that he taught at, they would choose one university instructor to give the last lecture of the year to the graduating class. And typically what they would do is pass along the wisdom. The instructor, the professors traded off, right? So every year a different professor got to do the last lecture of the year. And so in Randy's case, because he had pancreatic cancer and he knew his time was short, he requested, and they gave him the open door. And so he did the last lecture that year to the graduating class. But for him, it was a very lucid and powerful kind of like thesis on life. Like, I'll give you one example. On apologies, he said, if you don't hit it out of the park, if it's not 100% plus, then it's if it's a pass or fail thing, then it's a fail. So if it's a 99 or a 98, it's a fail. It has to be 100% on apologies. Well, what does that mean? He said, when you apologize, don't go to someone and say, I'm really sorry that I hurt your feelings, but really you're too sensitive. No, he basically said, what he's learned, this is his dying, wisdom to the senior graduating class. He's like, when you say you're sorry, you go and you say, I was so wrong. I am so very sorry. Can you ever forgive me? That's his advice for apologies, man. And he has this whole book. It's very short, but it's very powerful. Why do I bring that up? This man in his dying hours had such great lucidity, such clarity of mind, as the gale force winds of temporal life, of bodily as his body is winding down and he knows it. the ego gets pricked. And it's like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, right? And the ego gets pricked, and that thing just deflates. The ego begins to deflate, and that's powerful. Every spiritual master that I've ever read has always realized what a challenge that egoic perspective, that egocentric, I should say. The ego is basically a program that runs on our body, that we in our mind, that we need, so we don't step out in the street. It's self-preservation, right? Don't step out in the street when the light's red. You get killed. Oh, you're hungry, you're thirsty, you probably should drink some water, probably should eat some food. Otherwise, you'll eventually die, right? So it's a worthy program that runs on the unit, but taken to extreme, see, no bueno. It's not good. So taken to extreme, it's that egocentric approach, and every spiritual master that I've ever read that ever really amounted to anything or had power to back up the words. I kind of look at that too, I mean, not everyone's there to show off, but usually any spiritual master who had anything worthy of saying also did some powerful things. And everyone I've ever read has always talked about this problem and how it needs to be dealt with. So the egocentric mind will torment you. And that's something that we need to chip away at. And let's think about for a minute how to reshape our mind. Let's think about mindscaping, kind of like landscaping, but mindscaping, because the mind is, as the old saying went, for those of us who are Generation Xers, maybe baby boomers, maybe even some millennials remember this, mind is a terrible thing to waste, right? And if all you're doing is getting wasted, you might be happy. You might be eating Dorito chips and ice cream and watching Dude, Where's My Car? But there might be a little bit more, to that. You also might be able to create some of those good chemicals, some of those receptors, some of those cannabinoid receptors that are in your brain. Those can be activated through various forms of meditation. So let's talk about mindscaping for a second here, because I think that's really, really important in this subject. When you do something as simple as get up in the morning and brush your teeth, it's actually very powerful things are happening there. You might be really tired, and so because you're really tired, you might not think of it as a really amazing thing. But if you stop and think about, let's see, which hand do I use here? It's in frame. Okay. So if you stop and think about the fact that I can make a fist right now, that I think, okay, squeeze, make a fist, squeeze the arm, flex the arm. That may seem very basic, elementary, rudimentary, but that is what's happening right there is a very, very powerful thing, because in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, make a fist. And as I said, all these neurons, firing these electrical impulses, neurotransmitters, creating those chemicals from one cell to another, down to me actually manifesting a contraction of muscles. And some people in fitness would say expending energy, and I would agree, we're expending energy, but really, if you think about it, you're sending energy. When you do that, you're sending energy to that part of your body. It's very powerful through a mind process. So we create this coherence. We have intention and coherence at this point. So we have an intention to get out of bed, an intention to go into the bathroom and brush our teeth. And as we intend to do that, there's this coherence, and we create what we want to do. Now that, again, this is a basic thing in life. And I really believe that if you were on your deathbed, that you might see with even more clarity how miraculous it is that you do the things that you do, and how amazing the mind is, and how powerful it is through intention, through coherence, at creating everything from muscular, control, contractions, dexterity, to creating your own mental reality, to creating your own auric field that is inviting or not so much inviting, to bringing things into your life, attracting the things that either you want or you fear, or scattering the things, maybe that you don't want to scatter, or, driving away, being repulsive to maybe things that you want to, or maybe you don't want to be. It's really a lot of really neat stuff starts in the mind. The mind is where it all starts. And what I have found is the best form of mind control. And if we go back to the person who's riddled by mental activity, some people call it monkey mind, when you're riddled by thoughts of worry, thoughts of, fear, care, concern, all these things, when you're overwhelmed by thoughts, how do you get out of the vicious circle? There's tricks, like the vagus nerve hack. That's a trick. You can look it up. It's not bad. You breathe out longer than you breathe in, and this creates, your heart rate will lower. You'll start to feel more serene. Chemicals will be released in your body. You'll feel good. That's not a bad thing to practice. I would, if I were you, and if you were having problems in this area, I would look up the vagus nerve hack. I do it every day, even though I'm not feeling nervous, just to go even that much deeper in my meditation. For those of you who say mantras, I realized when I was at the wonderful Joshua Tree weekend retreat with Dharma House Collective over the weekend, we went out to Joshua Tree. And as we did a mantra meditation, I realized as we did this mantra meditation, it was kind of a long mantra. So I realized that we were in a sneaky roundabout way doing a vagus nerve breathing, a kind of a 1-to-2 breathing ratio of the vagus nerve hack. We were doing that in the mantra, because if you think about it, when you're saying a mantra, if you're saying, like I am peace or I am love, and then you take a breath in, and if you have a mantra that's reasonably long, or, doesn't have to be real long, but if it's 3 or 4 words, and then you take a quick breath and then you say it again, and you do this 108 times, you're doing it so fast that you're spending more time breathing out than you are breathing in. So many times when people are chanting a mantra, they don't realize it, but they're doing the vagus nerve hack, or what's sometimes called heart rate variability. So it's a great technique, but I think even more, that's a very powerful one. And I like to do that later. What I like to do first. So I'm going to give you some pointers on how to stop the tormenting mind. I have a lot of friends on Quora who've gone through, relationship issues. They want to know. I have other friends on Quora who practice Shambhavi Mudra and some other meditation techniques, Kriya and Kundalini, and so they want to know. We all want to know, and it takes a long time sometimes to get the upper hand on that freaking mind. It's almost like there's something living inside of us. Like, makes me wonder if that's what the spiritual sages were talking about when they talked about Satan. Hey, get behind me, Satan. That's probably addressing the mind more than he is some fallen angel, right? So here's what I do. I create coherence, breathing coherence, not the vagus nerve breathing, but I create a 1-1-1 ratio. And so I breathe in for 10 seconds and I hold it for 10 seconds. And then I breathe out for 10 seconds. And I gradually begin to expand that. And I eventually get up to 12, 15. So I'm doing 15 in, hold 15, 15 out. I get up to 20, get up to 25. Sometimes I do 30. Now it's not, these are not seconds. They're usually like a second and a half, I found, when we're counting. We're just counting. 1, 2, 3. We're not doing 1001. You could do that if you want. But what I wanted to say is when you do this 1-1-1 breathing ratio, you create this coherence in your body. It's not just breath. Your body is a beautiful conglomeration of just whirling atoms and just particles and energy. It's just, and all those, things are shimmering. Your body is mostly, matter they find is mostly empty. It's like most everything is translucent. We just can't seem to see through it with our physical eyes. But you're creating this coherence in your whole body. And it starts with the breath. The breath is the key. So the 1-1-1 ratio, I like that because when you advance in it, and you don't want to be struggling. When you're breathing out, like if you're doing 20, if when you're breathing out, around 15, you start running out of, and then, you're almost like cavitating or something. That's not good. So you don't ever want to push it too hard. You want to be relaxed when you do this. But you do want to work up to 20, maybe 25, and if you're really good, 30. When you get to 30, you know for sure that you're just doing one breath a minute. Why? Well, each one's not a second, but if you breathe in for a count of 30, you hold for a count of 30, and then you exhale for a count of 30, that's about one breath per minute. If you can do 10 to 12 minutes of one breath a minute, you will find a major, major shift happen in your life. I can't even tell you. I mean, there's reasons why. Some of the guys out there write about it, like Dr. Joe Dispenza and other gurus and teachers and mystics. They write about it. And yeah, it's about, some of these chemicals that get released when your heart gets more still and you just start breathing from the depths of your diaphragm, your belly, your lower belly, things like that. Yeah, so there's reasons. I'm not here to talk about all that. And I can say there's a lot of reasons, there's a lot of things we don't understand, but you'll create this coherence. And the first thing you will notice is improved sleep, is not loss of appetite, but more self-control of appetite and more self-awareness, like of your emotion. You will disassociate, and this is so important when it comes to mental modifications and getting control of your mind. You'll begin to notice your emotions and your thoughts about those emotions sometimes before you get triggered. And that's very, very important, that you make a distinction between the mental process and who you are in your ultimate higher self. And that is gigantically huge. That is a big breakthrough. Once you start seeing that, once you start seeing the patterns, and you're here you are, and there's a part of you, I'm trying to get my hand in frame there, and now here you are, and there's a part of you, a higher self, that can kind of see your own self. You see your own self, and you see, here's my hangups, here's my issues, here's the things that have happened to me in the past. Oh, and when he said that, when my boss said this, I thought he was going to fire me, so I said that. But now you're starting to see, instead of seeing from inside the emotions, instead of living an emotional life, now you've created this coherence through breath and through other meditation techniques. And now you are beginning to see mind patterns. And that is the beginning of the end. Yeah, it's the end. Yeah, when I say the end, I do mean death. And when I say death, I don't mean the physical body. I mean death to prison, to bondage and slavery, to egocentric mania. Death to that. And that's why I think some of the spiritual teachers said, unless you die daily, you're not going to experience these good things. So it's all starting to make sense, right? It's all starting to get clearer. So creating this powerful awareness, this higher self vision, coherence through breathing techniques, 1-1-1 ratio, hopefully up to 20, 25, maybe even 30 counts for all three. And then getting into, and I think this is probably the most powerful form of meditation I have ever experienced. I do that. And then the next thing I do is I do simple observational, and this is done almost in every tradition across the globe, observational breathing. Just observe your breath. Don't get involved in it. It's really hard because if I tell you, well, when you start observing your breath, the first thing you'll notice is your breath rate will slow down. If I tell you that, then the first thing that your mind and your ego wants to do is it wants to get in there and control the breath and say, well, it's desirable that our breath rate slow down, right? It's good for the heart and we're more spiritual. So what happens? The ego gets involved. The mind gets involved in this thing. And then, you want to sort of manufacture slowing down your breath, but that's not it. Again, we're going back to, it would almost be like, have you ever been sleeping next to someone and this probably happens a little bit more, ladies probably experience this a little bit more than guys, not in every case, but I think more often than not, if you have a big burly husband or boyfriend or whatever, and they're, kind of snoring or sleeping and they're keeping you up and you're like, dang, man, sleep next to this grizzly bear. And he's breathing, he's snoring, and you're sitting there and you're like, well, I guess I'm awake, and you're just laying there listening. And then all of a sudden he stops breathing and there's a big long pause. And you're like, oh my gosh. And 10 seconds pass, 30 seconds. And you're getting ready to shake him and give him mouth to mouth, right? And then he starts breathing again. You're like, dang, what was that? That was his body. See, his body shut down. He's only breathing at this point based on necessity. And when you're laying in bed and you're not moving, and if you're not trying to do trigonometry, anything that's burning energy, because thoughts burn energy, and we know that for those of us who study for finals. If you're not doing any of that stuff, the body doesn't need to breathe that much. You're not moving. You're not thinking much. All your sense organs are not working hard. Your eyes are not open. You're not listening. You shut all that stuff off. See, meditation, one of the goals of meditation is to go in the sleepful state, but with alertness. To be conscious while the body sleeps. This is one of the great hidden elements of meditation. And the observational breathing method, and if I say to you, it kind of looks like you're breathing when you're asleep, then of course the mind's going to probably kind of try and, you might even find that you're like imitating what a sleeping person sounds like, even though, do you do weird things when you sleep? Little puffs, or you hear people do puffs? You can't, so you can't say why this stuff happens really. But the point is when you do the observational breathing, your breath rate's going to slow down. And really, the way I do it is I'll give you some advice here. Don't breathe unless you have to. Don't hold your breath, but just observe your breath and stop getting involved in it and let it just go on its own. That's a very, very powerful thing, especially after you've done 10, 12 minutes of coherent 1-1-1 breathing. When you get an observational breath and you actually get your ego and your controlling, that controlling manipulative self, that wants to choose what, that always wants to win. That part of you that wants to decide what's going to be for dinner tonight, or what movie we're going to watch, or who gets to take the shower first, or who has to take out the trash this time. That part. You know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah, of course you don't do it. It's just the other people do, right? So yeah, that's a sign that you do it if you take that way. Okay, so that part of us, once we relinquish, control, now the breath becomes very powerful because we're only breathing when we have to. And what I found is that kind of meditation will become very electrified, very current oriented. You don't even have to be trained in any esoteric forms of energy meditation. If you do that coherent breathing and the observational breath, and a lot of people have a mantra when they do it, that just kind of helps them stay centered. But I wouldn't do it in the beginning. I think you should just observe the breath, because the mantra will tend to drive. When people do a mantra, when they're doing observation at the same time, the mantra will, it will affect the breath. So I recommend you just observe for a while until you get that down. Once you get that down though, you'll find you have currents going up you'll feel the currents going. Usually most people feel them on the Ida and Pingala channels, which are smaller energy channels. But then as you get deeper into meditation over the many months and even years, then you will feel that central. It's on the more in the back where the spine is, but you'll feel the energy going up the Sushumna, the central channel. And that's just on observational. You don't have to be doing any crazy secret yogic, techniques really, and you'll feel energy. And you could live off that. That would be enough. That will, as a matter of fact, I had a realization one day about, and this goes back to mind control. I was wondering why, at the movie theaters, they play, they play the previews, and then of course they have they have the introduction. What do? They show like popcorn just like tumbling, or they show the slow motion butter going into the popcorn and the salt, or just the ice cold Cokes. And I remember, years ago, my mom did studies on subliminal. She was a behavioral, she was an educator and behavioralist person. So they actually had to ban subliminal advertising because in movie theaters, they would flash like things like get Coke really fast, so fast that, people couldn't really, it wouldn't register in the conscious brain, but it would in the subconscious. So they had to ban that. But, when they don't even need to do that, right? Because if they show us like delectable popcorn with, greasy, shiny butter going over it and whatever, and Cokes and, Raisinets or whatever, it triggers memories of having that. Your mouth waters. If I say to you right now, lemon heads or lemon drops, or if I say to you, sour apple, gummy worms, or if I say to you, some of you already have your mouths are watering already, right? Memory. Isn't that amazing? Think about that. The mind just triggered that. And the salivary glands, they go. Strawberry, now and laters. Cherry, pie, right? So it's powerful. And these memories, these mental processes create neural pathways. When you begin to meditate and practice coherent breathing and observational breath, you will get it like any other activity you do. That's the one good thing about the body. Thank God for this. The body is always trying to get better. So you make neural pathway. That's why if you can just stop smoking like cigarettes for what is it, like 6 weeks or whatever, basically the neural pathways, if they're not used for a certain amount of time, they just kind of get erased. And that's why people say, yeah, I wasn't even craving it anymore. But then one day I was just, and I thought, yeah, I'll do it again. And it wasn't like, it wasn't like they're addicted. They just made a decision and then they got back and then the pathway was plowed again. And then if you've had addictions, you know what I'm talking about. But if you can just get, so these neural pathways will work in your benefit for the good things. And you will get better and better at meditation, and you will get better and better at meditation is a very subtle practice of mind control. Throwing the dog a bone. That's why I start out with the coherent breathing and then the observational breath, because if I can do those things, it's like throwing a dog a bone, just choose on the bone, right? For a while, it gives the mind something to do. And lo and behold, now your heart rate's down. Now you're going into the interior. Your eyes have been closed for a while. You've been gazing up and in, Shambhavi Mudra. Your hands have been on your lap, facing up. Your back has been straight. Spine is straight. Stomach slightly tucked. Chin level or slightly tucked. You've been in this position. Now, over time, your heart rate's down. The mind is calm. The body's relaxed. The energy is flowing. You will see things. Now I'm gonna dangle. I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it anyways. I'm going to dangle the popcorn and the candy in front of you right now. You will begin to see things. You will see light in the third eye. You will see colors. You do meditate. You do chanting into your energy vortexes, your chakras. You will begin to feel enormous amounts of energy, bliss, ecstasy at times. You will have almost like these quasi-hypnagogic visions. Well, what I mean by that is like that state in between like the waking and the sleeping state, where when you see things, you hear things. It doesn't always have to be bad. You will see sacred geometry. You will see things like other artists have drawn and sculptors have sculpted. You will see things that have been put into statues and paintings, and you will understand. You will not think those people over there who are part of a different religion than me, or you won't think they're weird, because one day you'll realize that they weren't trying to be weird. They just painted or sculpted what they saw or someone else saw and tradition carried on in an ecstatic state. The mind, this meditation that I gave you today, the meditation techniques, is the most rudimentary form of mind control. Those higher states will come, and they will include things like clairvoyance, clairaudience, and other things. These things are part of every human being. It's not just that, oh, this guy is a psychic or this guy's a medium or whatever. You will find that as you progress in your spiritual practice, that you have your day in the sun. I'm not saying that people need to see that you're great or this or that, but you'll have those gifts. That's what I mean by your day in the sun. You will get gifts. I had a wonderful gift that happened a couple months ago when I met a guy, and he was going through a rough time. I didn't know it, but I just got this download, and I started saying all these things to him, and his jaw dropped, and he was in tears. That's what he needed at that time. You know what that is, people? And this happens to anyone who is there, who is awake, who can be a conduit or a channel for good. That is what we mean by angel. I'm not saying I'm an angel. I'm a devil a lot of the times. Ask my friends, but right? And you are too, probably. But angel means messenger. you're bringing something. You're giving a message. You might give a vocal message, or it just might be a smile. It might be love. It might be an atmosphere, a feeling. It might be, comfort through your voice, or through something you're sharing, or through a song or a poem, or even something you read and you're reading it back to someone. These are gifts. And if all we have in our mind is mental chatter, then, that's a sad way to live. We don't want to just be dominated by mental chatter. We want to get past those terrible dark demons of fear and worry and dread. I remember oh my gosh, dread. That's what hell is. It's dread. It happens here on earth. If you've had the depths of these things, and you're shaking your head right now going, okay, and if this resonates with you and you like what I'm talking about, then, send me a message, like it, put a comment in the chat, subscribe to the channel. But this is very real. These things, these deep, dark places are very real, but I don't want you to think that it has to be that way. I know, even though I get these things from time to time myself, because I'm human, I've realized that so much of it is how we approach life. If you create your own spiritual practice, your own spiritual plan, it doesn't have to be what I do. It doesn't have to be breathing techniques or yoga. It could be church. It could be temple. It could be mosque. It could be reading poetry like Rumi, or Emerson, or there's so many different ways to go about it. You have to pick it. You should be excited about whatever direction you're going. If you're not excited about it, then it's time to do a U-turn and change the direction. So here's the deal. Do me a favor. Get a hold of your mind. Figure out what your spiritual practice is. Go the direction, follow the bliss, follow the joy, go in that direction. And then whatever direction you go into it deeply. And then do your best to the body is composed of cells. Every cell knows what to do. We are like we're like a body. If we don't know what to do and we're not doing what we should be doing, in human, physiology terms, that's cancer. A cancer cell doesn't know it needs to be processing toxins from the liver or whatever the cell's goal is. So we got to get out. We got to find what our purpose and goal is in life, and what the natural gifts are, so we can be a productive part of this universe, this life on earth. Every thought, every action sends out, it's like throwing a rock into a pond. It sends out a wave of energy. Let's make our waves good ones. Let's find out what our gifts are and give back. And once you start doing that, you'll find out why you were made. I'm Chris Anthony, the Streams of Light podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. Subscribe to the channel, like the podcast. Let's get the word out, and I'll see you next time.